Japanese girl showed respect and the horse blows back red. The sky was a calm blue, with only a few clouds drifting lazily in the distance. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of dewy grass and the earthy smell of the soil, a sign of the new day. In the quietness of this rural town, nature seemed to be gently waking up, and so did two young girls. Sakura and Emmy were best friends who lived just a few houses apart. They were both about 10 years old, bright-eyed and full of energy, with long black hair that swayed as they walked along the road. The two girls were inseparable, always sharing everything from school secrets to childhood dreams. They had known each other since they could remember, and their bond was something truly special. On this particular morning, like most others, they were walking to school together. Their school wasn't far, just a short 15-minute walk through the village. The route took them past a few houses, a small shrine, and a wide-open field where Tetsuya, the village's majestic horse, usually roamed. Tetsuya was an animal of great importance in the village, a symbol of beauty and strength. His coat was a rich, glossy brown, and his mane flowed like silk when the wind blew. He was a quiet, peaceful creature, spending most of his days grazing in the meadow or resting under the large trees that dotted the landscape. Sakura and Emmy had seen Tetsuya countless times over the years, but on this particular morning, something felt different. They were both quietly walking, lost in their own thoughts, when they noticed the horse standing near the edge of the field, looking out towards the horizon. His posture was calm, and he appeared to be deep in thought. There was a sense of stillness in the air, something almost magical about the way he stood there, as though he were waiting for something. Emmy was the first to break the silence. "Sakura, do you think Tetsuya is waiting for someone?" Sakura smiled, always the one to think a bit more deeply than her friend. "Maybe he's just enjoying the quiet morning," she said, her voice soft and thoughtful. "But you know, horses are very smart. Maybe he's waiting for us to notice him." Both girls stopped for a moment, standing on the narrow road that cut through the village, looking at the horse. For some reason, that morning felt different. It was as though the whole world was asking them to pause, to take a moment and truly appreciate the beauty around them. Without saying a word, both girls slowly turned towards Tetsuya and stood still. Sakura, who was always the more confident of the two, stepped forward first. She straightened her back, looked at the horse, and bowed her head. It was a simple gesture, a quiet sign of respect, one that she had been taught since she was little. In their culture, bowing was a way of showing honor and gratitude, whether to people, elders, or even animals. It was a gesture of humility, a way of acknowledging the life and spirit of everything around them. Emmy, always following Sakura's lead, smiled gently and mimicked her friend. She lowered her head just slightly, bowing in the same graceful manner. Both girls stood there for a moment with their heads lowered, showing Tetsuya the respect they had been taught to show all living creatures. Tetsuya, who had been standing perfectly still, seemed to notice them. He lifted his head slowly, his large, intelligent eyes meeting theirs. His gaze was calm and steady, and for a brief moment the girls felt as though he was looking directly into their souls. It wasn't just the ordinary look of a horse, it was something deeper. It felt as though Tetsuya understood exactly what they were doing. The horse did not move, nor did he make a sound, but there was something in the way he looked at them that made their hearts race. It was as if he was acknowledging their gesture, receiving the respect they had shown him. The air seemed to grow quieter, and the world around them slowed for just a moment. Sakura and Emmy stood there, their heads still bowed, unsure of what would happen next. They had shown respect, as they always did, but they had never expected a response. After all, horses weren't known for bowing back. Yet something about Tetsuya made them feel that this moment was different. And then, something unexpected happened. As if in response to their silent act of respect, Tetsuya slowly began to lower his head. It wasn't a quick or sudden movement. It was deliberate, graceful, and measured. The horse bent his neck gently, bringing his head closer to the ground in what seemed like a slow bow, as if he was mirroring the girl's gesture. Emmy gasped, her eyes wide with wonder. Did he just?" she whispered in disbelief. Sakura could hardly believe her eyes. She had seen many horses in her life, but never one that would bow in return. The sight of Tetsuya, his head lowered in such a graceful motion, was both beautiful and humbling. The girls didn't know how to react. They had expected nothing in return, but now they felt something deep within them stir, a sense of awe, a feeling of connection with the horse. The moment felt like a shared understanding, an unspoken exchange between two different worlds, the world of humans and the world of animals. Tetsuya wasn't just a horse in that moment. He was a part of something bigger, something magical. And the girls weren't just two young girls anymore. They were part of a long tradition of respect for the creatures that shared their world. For a few seconds, everything was still. The wind had stopped blowing, the birds were quiet, and even the trees seemed to hold their breath. It was a moment frozen in time. Then, just as slowly as it had begun, Tetsuya raised his head. He stood tall again, his graceful posture unchanged. The girls, still staring at him, felt a deep sense of gratitude, as if they had just witnessed something rare and precious. Sakura was the first to speak. Did that really just happen? Her voice was filled with awe, her heart still racing from the surprising gesture. Emmy smiled, still amazed by the experience. "I think it did." Tetsuya bowed back. He really understood. The two girls stood there for a moment longer, still processing the unexpected connection they had just shared with the horse. It wasn't just a physical bow, it was something more. It was a reminder of how, sometimes, the smallest gestures of respect could create a deep, unspoken bond between beings. With one last glance at Tetsuya, who was once again grazing peacefully, the girls smiled at each other. They didn't need to say anything else. They had shared a moment that spoke louder than words ever could. It was a moment that would stay with them for the rest of their lives, a memory that would continue to teach them the true meaning of respect and connection. As they continued their walk to school, Sakura and Emmy talked excitedly about what had just happened. But both of them knew that no words could truly capture the magic of the moment they had just experienced. It was something only their hearts could understand. Sakura and Emmy continued on their way to school, but their minds were far from the usual routine. They couldn't stop thinking about the unexpected moment they had shared with Tetsuya. It wasn't just that the horse had bowed to them, it was how it made them feel. It felt like something much deeper, like a connection between them and the horse that went beyond simple gestures. The girls had always respected animals, but what had happened that morning felt different. As they walked along the path, the village was quiet, and they could hear the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. The occasional bird called out from the trees, but the atmosphere felt serene, almost magical. It was as though the village itself was in harmony with the world around it, a harmony the girls now felt a part of in a way they hadn't before. The walk to school was a short one, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like time was moving slower. The usual chatter between the girls had turned into thoughtful silence. Emmy, usually full of questions, now had her eyes on the ground, lost in thought. Sakura, the older of the two, was deep in reflection. She had always believed in the importance of respect, especially for animals. It was something she had been taught by her grandmother, who had grown up in the village and carried on old traditions that had been passed down through generations. The older woman often spoke of the history of the village and its strong ties to nature. She told stories of the past when animals were considered sacred, respected not just as creatures of the earth, but as beings with spirits of their own. Her stories filled the girls' hearts with a sense of wonder and admiration for the natural world. It was from these tales that Sakura and Emmy had learned to show reverence for all life, from the smallest insect to the largest creature, like Tetsuya. Sakura's grandmother had told her many times that respect was the foundation of everything, the foundation of friendship, family, and even of life itself. Without respect, her grandmother often said, nothing lasts. Everything falls apart when we forget to respect one another, and all living beings, no matter how small, deserve our honor. Emmy had learned these same lessons in school. In the village, respect wasn't just a lesson, it was a way of life. Every morning, the children would bow to their teachers when they entered the classroom, as a sign of respect for the knowledge they were about to receive. They bowed to their elders, to the shrine in the village, and, in a more personal way, to the animals that roamed the fields and forests. It was all part of the culture, part of the belief that everything had value, everything deserved to be treated with kindness and humility. The more Sakura thought about it, the more she realized that Tetsuya's bow wasn't just a response to a gesture. It was a reminder of the deep bond humans shared with nature. Animals weren't just passive beings in the world. They had a spirit, a presence, and a connection to the people around them. That moment with Tetsuya had made her realize that she wasn't just bowing to the horse because it was polite. She was bowing because, in that small action, she was acknowledging that he, too, had a presence that deserved respect. As the girls walked past the shrine on the edge of the village, they passed a row of stone statues, each one dedicated to the animals that had once served the village. Some of the statues were of horses, others of dogs, and even one of a large, wise-looking owl. These statues were a testament to the village's long history of respecting animals, of seeing them not just as pets or creatures of convenience, but as beings that played important roles in the life of the village. Sakura looked at the statues and smiled, feeling a sense of pride in her village and in the tradition it held. She had always been proud of where she came from, of the values her family had instilled in her. But today, with the memory of Tetsuya's bow fresh in her mind, she felt an even deeper sense of connection to her heritage. "It's strange, Emmy," she said, breaking the silence. "I always knew we should respect animals, but today I feel like it means something more." Emmy nodded, her face thoughtful. "I know what you mean. I feel it too. When Tetsuya bowed, it was like he understood us. It was almost like he was saying thank you." Sakura paused for a moment, thinking about her friend's words. Exactly. It was like he was telling us that he saw us, that he wasn't just a horse standing in the field. He was a part of this world just like us. Emmy smiled. "And he bowed back because we showed him respect. He's not just an animal, he's a part of this world too. Just like the trees, the birds, and the mountains, everything is connected." Sakura smiled back, feeling a warmth in her chest. Emmy had always been the more sensitive of the two, often seeing things that others didn't. Her words made sense to Sakura. What had happened with Tetsuya wasn't just a random event. It was a sign, a reminder that the world was full of connections, and that respect wasn't just something to be given to people. It was something to be given to all living things. As they neared the school, the two girls' conversation shifted. But even as they entered the classroom, the feeling of connection to the world around them stayed with them. The lesson they had learned that morning would stay with them long after the school day had ended. The teacher, Mrs. Yamada, greeted the class with a smile. She was a kind woman who always encouraged her students to think about the bigger picture. She believed in teaching the children not just knowledge but values, like respect, kindness, and understanding. It was a lesson that had been passed down from generation to generation. That afternoon, during the lunch break, Emmy and Sakura sat together on the steps of the school. The other children played in the yard, laughing and shouting, but the girls were quiet, their thoughts still on the horse and the bow. They shared a lunch of rice, pickles, and fish, the taste of the meal comforting and familiar. But the conversation, too, felt familiar, like the deep conversations they had shared many times before. Emmy took a bite of her rice and then looked at Sakura. "You know, Sakura, I think that bow from Tetsuya means something special. Like, animals really do understand us. We don't always notice, but they're listening. Sakura nodded. Yes, it's like what my grandmother always says, respect is everything. It's how we connect to others, even animals. The two girls smiled, their hearts full of understanding. They had learned something important that day, not just about showing respect, but about how deeply respect could be felt. It wasn't just a word, it was an action. It was something that, when shared, could change the way they saw the world. It was a lesson they would carry with them, from that day forward, in everything they did. The following days after their encounter with Tetsuya felt strangely different for Sakura and Emi. It was as if the world had changed, or rather, as if they had changed in the world. The air around them seemed a little more alive, the trees a little greener and the sky a little bluer. They hadn't expected something so simple, yet so profound, to affect them so deeply. The memory of the horse bowing in response to their gesture of respect stayed with them, occupying their thoughts even when they were in school or at home. Every morning, as they walked to school, the girls found themselves glancing toward Tetsuya's field, hoping to catch another glimpse of the horse. It wasn't that they expected him to bow again. No, they knew that what had happened was something special, something that couldn't be repeated on command. But there was a quiet hope in their hearts, a wish that they could somehow continue the connection they had felt with him. And yet, every day as they walked past the field, Tetsuya stood quietly, grazing or resting under a tree, completely unaware of their hopeful glances. The girls would bow to him each time as they had done that morning, but he didn't seem to respond in the same way. There was no second bow, no magical moment of connection, just the peaceful stillness of the horse in the field. At first, they didn't mind. They had learned not to expect anything in return for showing respect. But as the days went by, both Sakura and Emi started to feel a little disappointed. It wasn't that they wanted Tetsuya to bow again. It was more that they missed that feeling of recognition, that sense that their small gesture had been truly understood by the horse. One day, as they walked past the field, they noticed something unusual. Tetsuya was no longer standing still, grazing lazily like he usually did. Instead, he was pacing back and forth near the fence, his head turned toward them. His movements were graceful, but there was a sense of urgency in the way he walked. His hooves clicked softly on the ground as he trotted back and forth, his eyes never leaving the girls. Emi looked at Sakura, her heart beginning to race. "Sakura, do you think he remembers us?" Sakura felt her chest tighten with excitement. "I don't know, but it's definitely different today. I've never seen him act like this." The two girls stopped in their tracks, their eyes locked on Tetsuya. The horse's pacing seemed to grow faster, more purposeful. It was as though he was waiting for something. The girls stood silently, unsure of what to do. They had never seen Tetsuya so animated, so full of energy. He had always been calm and serene, a symbol of peace and quiet strength. But today, he seemed to be reaching out to them in a way they couldn't fully understand. And then, without any warning, Tetsuya did something they never expected. He stopped pacing. He lifted his head high, his gaze fixed directly on them. His large, dark eyes seemed to sparkle in the sunlight, and for a moment the world seemed to fall silent around them. Everything, the rustling leaves, the distant sounds of birds, faded into the background as the girls felt the full weight of his attention. Sakura's breath caught in her throat. "Emi, do you think?" Before she could finish her sentence, Tetsuya's body began to move in a slow, deliberate motion. He lowered his head just as he had done that first morning. The girls watched in awe as the horse's movements were as graceful and fluid as ever. It was a bow, just like the one he had given them before, only this time it seemed even more meaningful, more personal. Emi gasped, her eyes wide with wonder. "He's bowing again. He really remembers us." Sakura could hardly believe it. She felt a wave of warmth spread through her chest, a feeling of connection that she couldn't fully describe. This wasn't just a simple response. It was something deeper, something more significant. It felt as though Tetsuya wasn't just bowing to them out of habit or instinct. No, it felt as though he was acknowledging them, recognizing their presence in the world in a way that was profound and moving. The girls stood there for several moments, their heads slightly bowed in return, acknowledging the horse's gesture. It was a quiet, mutual moment of respect between two different worlds, human and animal. They didn't speak, but their hearts were full of gratitude. Tetsuya had done something extraordinary, something that words couldn't fully capture. In that brief exchange, the girls understood something that they had only vaguely grasped before. Respect wasn't just a one-way action. It was a shared experience, something that could be felt deeply by both parties, regardless of who or what they were. After the moment passed, Tetsuya raised his head again, standing tall and calm as he had done before. His eyes lingered on the girls for a moment longer, as if to reassure them that he had seen them, that he had understood. Then, with a final glance, he turned and walked back toward the middle of the field, resuming his peaceful grazing as though nothing had happened. The girls stood in stunned silence for a few moments. They had received exactly what they hadn't expected, a second bow from Tetsuya, a moment of understanding between them and the horse. It wasn't just about the gesture itself, it was about the meaning behind it. They hadn't asked for anything in return, but Tetsuya had responded, not out of obligation but out of a shared sense of respect. Finally, Emi spoke, her voice quiet but filled with awe. I think, I think we're meant to learn something from this, Sakura. Tetsuya didn't have to bow, but he did. And it's like he's teaching us that when we show respect, the world responds to us in ways we can't always explain. Sakura nodded, her thoughts spinning. Yes, it's like the world is alive and it's connected in ways we can't always see. When we give respect, we get something back, even if it's just in a small way. They stood there for a few more moments, watching the horse as he grazed peacefully under the tree. It was as though the whole world was in perfect harmony, a quiet balance between the girls, the horse, and the earth beneath their feet. The girls didn't know what would happen next, but they knew one thing for sure. This was a moment they would carry with them forever. Tetsuya had shown them that respect wasn't just a gesture. It was a language that could be understood by all living things, no matter their shape or form. And in that shared moment, the bond between the girls and the horse had grown stronger, deeper, and more meaningful than they could have ever imagined. The moment with Tetsuya had left a lasting impact on Sakura and Emi, but neither of them expected the ripples from that experience to spread so quickly through the village. It wasn't long before other people in the town began to hear about the special connection the two girls had shared with the horse. The story spread quietly at first, through whispers in the market and conversations among the elders. But as time passed, it became a topic of discussion wherever the villagers gathered. One afternoon, as the girls were walking home from school, they were stopped by Mrs. Sato, an elderly woman who lived in a small house at the edge of the village. Mrs. Sato was known for her wisdom and gentle nature. She had seen many generations come and go, and she often shared stories of the old days when the village was a place of even deeper traditions. Mrs. Sato was sitting on a bench outside her home, enjoying the cool breeze that blew through the trees. She looked up as the girls approached, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Ah, Sakura, Emi," she called, her voice soft but filled with affection. "I've heard the story about the horse. Tetsuya, wasn't it?" The girls stopped, a little surprised. They hadn't realized that their small act of respect had traveled so far. Sakura smiled politely and Emi nodded shyly. "Yes, Mrs. Sato," Sakura said. "Tetsuya. He bowed back to us. It was really special." Mrs. Sato's eyes sparkled as she leaned forward. "I'm glad you both experienced that. It's a rare thing, to have such a deep connection with an animal. You've both learned something very important." Emi looked at Mrs. Sato curiously. "What do you mean, Mrs. Sato?" The older woman chuckled softly and patted the bench beside her, inviting the girls to sit down. They obeyed, eager to hear what she had to say. You see, respect isn't just about bowing or showing kindness in return, Mrs. Sato began, her voice filled with the weight of years of experience. Respect is a way of life. It's something that goes beyond the surface. When we show respect to others, whether they are people or animals, we are acknowledging that they have value, that they matter. And the world, in turn, recognizes that acknowledgement. She paused for a moment, watching the girls as they took in her words. Tetsuya's bow wasn't just a response to your gesture. It was his way of telling you that he, too, recognizes you. He respects you in return. Sakura and Emi sat quietly, the truth of Mrs. Sato's words sinking in. They had always been taught to show respect, but they hadn't realized how powerful such a simple act could be. It wasn't just about giving respect. It was about receiving it as well. And the idea that the horse had recognized their kindness and returned it in his own way filled them with a sense of humility. Mrs. Sato smiled softly, her gaze distant as though she were remembering something from long ago. When I was young, my grandmother taught me much the same thing. She said that animals have their own spirits, their own understanding of the world. They might not speak like us, but they feel and understand just as deeply. Respect is the bridge between us and them. It's what makes the world turn in harmony. Emi's eyes widened as she thought about what Mrs. Sato had said. So, Tetsuya wasn't just bowing because we did. He really understood what we were doing. Mrs. Sato nodded slowly. Exactly, Emi. He didn't just bow because he was trained to do so. He bowed because he felt your respect. He knew that you saw him not just as a horse, but as a being worthy of honor. Animals, especially horses, are often more aware than we give them credit for. They understand the energy we put out into the world, and when we show kindness, they return it. But it's up to us to recognize that response. Sakura felt a warmth in her chest as she thought about the encounter with Tetsuya. She had felt something deep in her heart when he bowed to them. It wasn't just a friendly gesture, it felt like an acknowledgement of the bond they shared. The girls hadn't just been showing respect to Tetsuya, they had been acknowledging that they, too, were part of the world, part of the great circle of life that included both humans and animals. That's beautiful, Sakura said softly. I never thought of it that way. I thought it was just a simple act of kindness, but it's so much more. Mrs. Sato smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. It is, my dear, and now that you understand, you'll find that the world will begin to reflect your respect in unexpected ways. Animals, people, the earth itself, they will respond to you. You'll see that everything is connected, and that connection is what makes life meaningful. Emi looked up at Mrs. Sato with a mixture of curiosity and wonder. But what can we do to show respect to everything around us? The old woman's face grew serious, yet kind. It's about how you live each day, Emi. It's about being mindful of others, of the world around you. It's about listening when others speak, whether they are human or not. It's about paying attention to the small things, the way the wind feels on your face, the rustle of the leaves, the sound of the birds. And most importantly, it's about being grateful for all that is given to you. When you live with that kind of awareness, respect flows naturally. Sakura felt a shift in her heart. It was as though Mrs. Sato's words had opened up a new way of thinking, a way of seeing the world that she had never fully understood before. The girls had always respected animals, but they had never realized just how much respect they were capable of giving, nor how much they could receive in return. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the village, Mrs. Sato stood up slowly, her old joints creaking. You two are special, she said, her voice filled with affection. Remember that respect is not a one-way street. When you show kindness and honor to others, whether they are human or animal, you are helping to create a more peaceful world. And in return, the world will show you its beauty, in ways both big and small. Sakura and Emmy stood as well, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over them. They thanked Mrs. Sato and promised to remember the lessons she had shared. As they walked away from the old woman's house, they felt like they had learned something truly important, a lesson that would shape the way they lived for the rest of their lives. The next day, as they passed Tetsuya's field, they noticed something even more incredible. The horse once again looked up from his grazing. He stood tall, his eyes meeting theirs as they walked by. This time he didn't bow, but he stood there, watching them with a sense of calm and understanding, as though acknowledging their journey, both personal and shared. Sakura smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. "Thank you, Tetsuya," she whispered under her breath, knowing that he could hear her even without words. And as they continued their walk home, the girls felt a quiet joy in their hearts, knowing that the lessons they had learned about respect would guide them through all the days to come. Years passed, but the memory of that morning with Tetsuya, the quiet bow, the shared understanding, never left Sakura and Emmy. The lessons they had learned about respect and the deep connection between humans, animals, and the world around them continued to guide them in ways they hadn't expected. The village, too, had changed over the years, though not in ways that diminished its traditions. The winding roads remained, the fields continued to bloom, and Tetsuya still grazed peacefully in the meadow, just as he always had. But the lessons the girls had learned from the horse, from Mrs. Sato, and from their shared experiences had woven themselves into the very fabric of the village's life. As Sakura and Emmy grew older, their bond remained just as strong as it had been when they were children. Now, at the age of 17, the two girls were no longer simply schoolmates. They were young women, each pursuing her own path, yet both carrying the same values of respect and gratitude that had been taught to them from a young age. Sakura had always loved learning. She spent her days studying the history and culture of their village, hoping to one day become a teacher. She was passionate about sharing the wisdom of their ancestors, particularly the lessons on how respect was a foundation for all relationships, whether between humans or animals. She had never forgotten Mrs. Sato's words about respect not being just a gesture, but a way of living. It was something that had shaped her view of the world. Emmy, on the other hand, had always felt a deep connection with animals. She had grown up watching Tetsuya and other animals in the village, observing how they moved, how they interacted with the world, and how they communicated without words. Emmy had always known she wanted to work with animals, and after high school, she decided to study veterinary medicine. She wanted to understand animals even better, to care for them in the way they deserved, and to share with others the bond that she knew was possible between humans and animals. Despite their different paths, both girls remained deeply connected to their village and to each other. They often met in the evenings to talk, and their conversations were always filled with gratitude for the lessons they had learned. They would walk together down the old roads, past the field where Tetsuya still roamed, and they would pause to bow their heads, remembering the magical moment when the horse had bowed back to them. One day, after finishing their daily routine, Sakura and Emmy walked to the meadow to visit Tetsuya. It had been a while since they had seen the horse, and both girls missed the peaceful, wise presence he brought to the village. As they approached the field, they were surprised to find the horse standing at the far end, his coat as shiny as ever, but looking older, slower. Tetsuya was no longer the young, strong horse he had once been. His mane had grayed slightly, and his movements were slower than before. The girls could see the signs of age in him, and a wave of sadness passed over them. Time, like everything else, had caught up with Tetsuya, just as it had with them. Still, the girls smiled and waved as they approached. When Tetsuya saw them, he raised his head, his eyes locking onto theirs. It was as though he remembered them as well, as though the connection they had shared all those years ago had never faded. The girls felt a sense of peace wash over them, as if everything in the world was exactly as it should be. Sakura was the first to step forward. She bowed her head just as she had done so many times before, offering the same respectful gesture they had given him when they were children. Emmy followed her lead, bowing slightly and smiling softly. For a moment, nothing happened. Tetsuya stood there, watching them, his eyes soft with understanding. The wind blew gently through the grass and the birds sang in the distance. The world around them seemed to stand still, waiting for something. And then, just as it had all those years ago, Tetsuya slowly lowered his head. It was a slow, deliberate movement, as graceful as ever. He bowed in return, just as the girls had always hoped. His eyes never left theirs, and in that moment the bond they had shared as children was rekindled. The girls stood there, their hearts full of emotion. They hadn't expected Tetsuya to bow again, especially not now when he was older and slower. But in that gesture, they felt the same deep respect they had felt all those years ago, the same unspoken understanding between them and the horse. It was as though Tetsuya had passed on his own legacy of respect to them, reminding them that no matter how much time passed, the bonds they had formed were eternal. As the horse raised his head and returned to grazing in the field, Sakura and Emmy stood in quiet reflection. The world had changed around them, but the lessons they had learned had only become more meaningful. Respect, they realized, wasn't just something that could be taught. It was something that had to be lived, something that had to be carried forward in every action, every word, and every relationship. In the days that followed, Sakura and Emmy continued to live their lives with the same sense of respect and gratitude they had learned from Tetsuya. Sakura shared her knowledge of their village's traditions with her students, teaching them about the importance of honoring all living beings. She told the story of Tetsuya's bow and the lessons it had taught her, hoping to inspire others to live with the same awareness and kindness. Emmy, now a veterinarian, worked with animals every day. She treated each animal with the same respect and care she had shown Tetsuya, and she made sure to teach others about the deep connection that could exist between humans and animals. She often found herself thinking back to that moment in the meadow when the horse had bowed in return. It reminded her every day that animals, too, had spirits and emotions, and that their needs were just as important as our own. The girls continued to visit Tetsuya, even as he grew older, and they made sure to show him the same respect they always had. Though his steps grew slower and his movements more tired, Tetsuya remained a symbol of the quiet power of respect, a living reminder of the lessons that had shaped their lives. And as they watched him graze peacefully under the trees, Sakura and Emmy knew that they had been given a gift of understanding that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. They knew that respect, when given freely and sincerely, had the power to change the world. It was a legacy that they would carry forward, just as Tetsuya had carried it for so many years. With each passing year, the memory of the horse's bow remained in their hearts. And as the girls continued to live their lives, they would always remember that moment in the meadow when the horse had bowed back. It was a reminder that respect, love, and understanding could create bonds that transcended time, and that those bonds would last forever.